The Cold War begins. Former allies become rivals as Stalin imposes communist rule on Eastern Europe. The Allied leaders met for a final time in July 1945 in Potsdam, Germany. President Roosevelt had died in April. He was succeeded by his vice president, Harry S. Truman. At Potsdam, Truman tracked down Stalin for a private word. The United States, Truman said, had developed a new weapon of unusual destructive force. Stalin acted pleased but asked no questions. In fact, Soviet spies had already informed him of the Americans' successful test of an atomic bomb. Stalin's own top-secret nuclear program was well underway. Soon after the conference, the U.S. dropped 2 of its atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The devastating explosions helped force the Japanese to surrender. They also sent a warning to Stalin: "We have the bomb, and you don't. Watch your step." An observer stands in the ruins left by the atomic bomb that the U.S. dropped on Hiroshima, Japan on August 6, 1945. The threat, however, did not stop Stalin from taking over Eastern Europe. The war had left the entire region in Stalin's hands. As soon as the fighting stopped, the Soviets went to work installing friendly governments in Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Albania, and the eastern half of Germany. Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia were simply absorbed into the USSR. In these so-called satellite states, Stalin set up governments that would do his bidding. Opposition leaders were jailed and killed. Elections were rigged, and pro-Soviet leaders put in charge. Private property and businesses were all taken over by the government. The Red Army and secret police stood by, waiting to crush any sign of resistance. In March 1946, Winston Churchill lashed out at Stalin in a speech that would be quoted for years to come. The countries of Eastern Europe might remain independent in name, he said, but in reality, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. Eastern Europe was being absorbed into Stalin's empire. World War II had ended, but a new era of global tension had taken its place. This conflict became known as the Cold War, and it pitted the U.S. and other capitalist democracies against the Soviet Union and the communist governments it controlled. The two superpowers never went to war directly, but they competed viciously for allies around the globe. They sent spies to rival capitals to dig up top-secret information, and they competed in an arms race that would eventually produce enough nuclear weaponry to destroy the world many times over. In 1948, Stalin challenged the Americans in the first major conflict of the Cold War. After World War II, the Soviets and other allies had split Germany between East and West. Berlin sat in the Soviet region, but the city was divided into 4 zones, controlled by the US, the USSR, Great Britain, and France. On June 24th, Stalin ordered a blockade set up around the western part of Berlin, the zones controlled by the US, Britain, and France. All supplies entering the zones were to be seized. Stalin hoped to force the Western powers to hand over their sections of Berlin. His old allies, he thought, would not dare risk a war by breaking through the blockade. Stalin was right. The Western powers did not directly challenge the Soviet blockade. Instead, they flew over it in a massive airlift. Flying day and night, cargo planes delivered tons of food and supplies to the trapped people of West Berlin. After almost 11 months of the Berlin airlift, Stalin realized that his plan had failed. He called off the blockade, but it was only the beginning of a global conflict that would last for more than 4 decades. Children watch a cargo plane fly over Berlin, Germany. The US and other countries dropped food and supplies to the western part of the city, which the Soviets had blockaded.